Thanks very much. Thank you, Madam Deputy Chair, and I'm pleased to see my friend the member for Hughes is back because we can address some of the calumny that was contained in his address. And yes, I will tell you about this desalination plan because it's been very clear in Perth that since 1975 we have seen a massive drop-off in both our rainfall and stream flows. I know if you're not from Sydney you're camping out, but I'll just give the member, I'm happy to give the member a map of Australia and to show him that there are some other places other than Sydney in Australia, and Perth being one of those, and being a state that punches well above its weight in terms of its economic contribution. But as I was seeking to explain to the member, who's never heard of anything outside Sydney, that in Western Australia, in Perth and the southwest of the state, we've seen a dramatic, since 1975, we've seen a dramatic decline, a decline that is really occurring exponentially, if you can have an exponential decline, in both our rainfall and in both our stream flows. Now, as a result, Perth, whose population has been growing very dramatically, was by 2001 facing really a very severe water crisis. And I want to put on record my congratulations particularly to Jeff Gallop, who was the person that totally recognised in government that this was not just a drought that Western Australia was going through, but rather that there was a systemic shift in our climate pattern as a result of global warming. And as a result, we commissioned our first desalination plant, 115 gigawatts. In 2001, we made the decision. That was finally commissioned in 2006, and shortly thereafter it became evident, far from this being some sort of white elephant infrastructure, that indeed we needed a second desalination plant. And I think there would not be a person in Perth. There would not be a person in Perth that would not. Well, we've built our second one. We're a bit ahead of you guys over there in your in your perhaps less sophisticated political culture than we have in Western Australia. But we have managed to get on with the job in Western Australia and build those desalination plants, without which Perth would not be able to continue to grow and be predicted, as it is, to outstrip Brisbane as the third sized city in the third sized city. But I'm sure the member for Hughes...
I would ask the member for Hughes to desist and allow the member for Perth to continue in silence.
I'm sure he appreciates the opportunity of having a little bit of an education. And I'd also say to the member for Hughes that in all this concern about our future, our children and our grandchildren, and the cost of electricity, would he look at the impact of climate change and the health effects that are going to occur in the community if we do not face up to the need to address these very serious issues of climate change, and that investment in renewable energy is about providing us with a long-term capacity to provide energy that is not going to cost us the earth literally. And I will comment that even the Warburton report recognised that in the long term, investment in renewable energy will lead to a decline in the cost of energy. Now, what I wanted to talk about today is really how a provision, again, that's woven into this budget, and indeed the last budget, is causing very poor planning outcomes in Perth. And we know that the Prime Minister famously has been reluctant, or has refused to allow a rational approach to be taken to the investment in infrastructure in urban areas, and that he has, as stated in his battle lines, he has a deep and profound ideological opposition to public transport. He does not believe that it provides people with that same opportunity to be a king in their castle, that because people are going from different places to different destinations, it is not possible to make public transport that is fast and efficient and attractive to the commuter. Now, we know, and around the world people know, that that is abject nonsense. But we have this incredible primitive ideology now entrenching itself into government policy, and we have this extraordinary decision that has been made that even though 80% of Australia's population live in big cities, and big cities, it is understood, rely on being public transport to be able to provide the mobility that allows them to exploit the agglomeration benefits of being a big city. So the whole thing that makes city works is you bring all these people together that have got specialist skills and a diversity of skills, and that together creates the creativity and the range of skills that you need to drive the economy forward. All of that depends on there being mobility, and we absolutely understand, you know, there's even in the Middle East these days, they are absolutely committed to massive urban transport projects that are going ahead in Doha and Dubai and Riyadh, all throughout the Middle East, and understanding that we need to do this. But we have got here as our Prime Minister this cultural primitive locked in the ideology of the 1950s and 1960s, and literally can't see it. Now, the justification of the Prime Minister, well, we're going to walk away from rail and we'll only fund roads. And he says, but that's not going to be an anti-rail project when challenged. That's not going to be an anti-rail stance, because what we will do is we'll free up money, and that will allow the states to build the rail because we'll be spending more money on the roads. Now, of course, we know that was never going to happen, and we know that what was going to be the inevitable consequence is that the state governments will be chasing the dollars, so they'll be moving their commitments away from rail projects into road projects so that they can access those federal dollars, because you don't get federal dollars, you don't get 100% federal funding of a project. Normally you would only get around 50% of a funding of a project, and hence you are creating a perverse incentive for roads to be privileged over public transport. Now, there is no clearer case of this than in Perth. Now, at the last election, the Premier of Western Australia, Colin Barnett, went to the election with two key promises in two marginal seats that he was seeking to win, 2 seats he was seeking to win. One was that he was going to build a rail link to the Perth airport and beyond, fully costed, fully funded. And then he was going to, and that was going to be built by 2016, I think it was. And then he was going to build a max light rail, which was going to be a light rail system around the inner suburbs of Perth, heading up into the middle-ranking northern suburbs. Fully funded, fully costed, he said. Now, since then, he has, of course, decided that he can no longer afford these. So 2013, not that long ago, made that fully funded, fully costed commitment. The Perth Airport Rail Link has been delayed now by some 2 years to help him manage his costs, and the Max Light Rail system has been totally and utterly abandoned because he said he just didn't have the money. However, he has been able to bring onto the agenda a $1.6 billion road project, $1.6 billion road project that was never an election commitment. So we can't afford to do those rail projects, that he committed to at the last election, but he can do a road project because he's out there chasing the federal dollars. And we've seen that this has been this proposal that we have now, the road proposal, the Perth Freight Link, has been the most poorly designed and poorly thought through project. And it's because it was done without any planning, because it was done in response to an ideological imperative. And if we had in a situation where the Labor government federal Labor government in 2013 had actually put into the budget $500,000, $500 million for Perth Rail projects. It wasn't confined to a particular project, but whatever project which the state government would want to bring forward for priority funding, $500 million. Now that $500 million had to come out of the budget because of the Abbott ideology. But you couldn't just leave this big gaping hole there. You had to find another project. You had to drum something up. And so they created this project, the Perth Freight Link, which is an amalgamation of 3 projects, one which was already funded under the Labor government, which is an upgrade of traffic around Leach Highway and High Street, creating an improved, it was a $59 million project, creating improved pathways into the Fremantle port. But they added to that the Roe Highway Stage 8, and they added this amazing new design of work proposal for work on Stock Road. Now, between those projects, that is a $1.6 billion project. Now, what we've seen is that this has been done in an absence of any proper planning in a strategic sense. We know that even the Treasurer is acknowledging that within that the Fremantle container facility will be at peak capacity by, well, he's saying in the next 10 to 15 years, but even the projections shown in the Perth Freight Link show that really that's going to happen somewhat sooner than that, and that a new port in the Kwinana will have to be built really by about 2021. So within 2 years of this Perth Freight Link into the Fremantle port being open, we will actually have to build a new port in Kwinana on the Coburn Sound. Now, we'll have to build infrastructure even into that. Now, I expect that that port, that new port or that new facility will be privately built. But we will have to provide road and rail access into that port. I mean, how much better would it be if we were going to be taking that money and ensuring that we were building, putting a road and rail infrastructure into a port that is going to be around for decades to come, rather than building, because of this need to fill a hole created by Tony Abbott's apathy, by the Prime Minister's antagonism to public transport, that we have to get this project, cobble it together, chuck it in and try to make it work. Now, of course, now we've got, in the last week, we've had the Minister for Transport saying, oh, well, you know, we had really robust planning, but I'm not actually sure that we have got the right route into the port. So here we are with the project. We're supposed to be in the middle of the project, and now even the Minister for Transport, when he's realising how many houses and businesses he's going to have to knock over, is querying whether or not he's got the route of this Perth Freight Link right. Again, absolute and complete chaos and anarchy caused by an ideological limitation on the part of the Prime Minister. So I urge us to go back to the drawing board. Let's have a look at this project. Let's have a look at what we can do with this $1.6 million. Should we be investing in public transport infrastructure so that Western Australia, Perth is currently predicted to, by 2031, be the congestion capital of Australia. We have got a far lower rate of public transport usage than the cities of Melbourne and Sydney. So if we want to avoid going down this predictive path of being the congestion capital of Australia, we are really going to have to ramp up our public transport product and ensure that we get people out of their cars into public transport, into modern, efficient public transport that can, it's been demonstrated, can attract commuters and help us solve this congestion problem.